When I was growing up, we had a short gravel driveway, really just a couple of gravel tire tracks that came up into the backyard from the alley. When it rained, we would, of course, get puddles in the dips of this driveway. That, thanks to compacted soil, shade from a huge elm tree, and the humidity of Midwestern summer, would stick around for quite a while. I remember sailing leaf and paper boats in these puddles as a child. And I also remember that insects like water striders and diving beetles would appear in them like magic. Now, in the last episode of Dirt Dispatches, I talked about my fascination with seasonal or ephemeral wetlands. How it's always amazed me that things like water striders and diving beetles seem to find these temporary wetlands relatively quickly. So that's what I'm going to tell you about today. Some really cool aquatic insects, water striders, and predacious diving beetles. I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara, and this is the Dispatches from the Forest podcast. If you've spent any time around any body of water, whether a lake, pond, swamp, marsh, river, stream, or even, like I mentioned, just a persistent mud puddle, you've probably seen a water strider. Now, depending on where you live, they may be called something different, like water skeeters, water scooters, water bugs, although technically a water bug is an entirely different insect, pond skaters, water skippers, water gliders, water skimmers, or puddle flies. They're generally small with a body length of less than half an inch, 12 millimeters. And about 90% of water striders are found in freshwater, but the remaining 10% are marine, making them exceptional among insects. But whatever you want to call them, and wherever you find them, they're in the order of Hemiptera, true bugs. Like the other 80,000 true bugs, their mouth parts have evolved for piercing and sucking. But what makes the 1,700 or so species of water striders really unique is being anatomically evolved for running on top of the water's surface. So, how do they accomplish this feat? Well, first of all, their legs and body are covered in something called hydrofuge hair piles. Hydrofuge hair piles are small hydrophobic microhairs, more than 1,000 per square millimeter. These hairs repel water, preventing drops from weighing down the body and making the water strider's legs and body effectively unwettable. Second are their legs. Like all insects, water striders have 3 pairs of legs. The front legs are the shortest and have a retractable preapical claws. Preapical claws are claws that are not at the end of the leg, but rather halfway through. Imagine having your hand on the inside of your elbow. These claws are adapted for capturing prey. The middle legs are longer than the first pair, but shorter than the last pair, and they're adapted for essentially rowing the insect through the water. The hind pair are the longest, and they help spread the bug's weight over a larger surface area, and they're also used for steering the bug across the surface of the water. A water strider's legs are strong, but they're also flexible, which lets them keep their weight evenly distributed and flow with the water's movement. It's through the combination of weight distribution, the water's surface tension, and the hydrofuge hair piles on the legs that keep the water strider above the water. And water striders are fast. They can move across the surface at 4 feet, 1 meter per second or faster. So what's all that speed good for? Well, water striders are predators, and they feed on invertebrates, mainly things like insects that fall onto the water's surface. With their front legs, they can detect vibrations in the water made by struggling prey, kind of like a spider with a web. The water strider grabs the prey with those preapical claws, punctures the prey's body with its proboscis, injects salivary enzymes that break down the internal structures, and then sucks out the resulting fluid. Yum! But water striders are also territorial. Both female and male adults hold separate territories, although usually the male's territories are larger than the female's. During the mating season, water striders, primarily the males, make vibrations in the water themselves as a way to both defend their territory and the female in it. There are 3 main frequencies that they use in these communication ripples. 25 Hz is a repel signal, 10 hertz is a threat signal, and 3 hertz is a courtship signal. When a water strider is approaching another water strider, it will first give out the repel signal to let the other water strider know that they're in its area. If the resident water strider doesn't return the repel signal, then the intruding strider knows that it's approaching a female, and it switches to the courtship signal. A receptive female lowers her abdomen and allows the male to mate. A non-receptive female raises her abdomen and emits the repel signal. Males that are allowed to mate will stay attached to that female until she's ready to lay her eggs. Females oviposit, or lay their eggs, by submerging and attaching the eggs to stable surfaces underwater, like plants or stones. But even though they're territorial during the breeding season, outside of the breeding season, water striders often live in large groups. In these groups, they'll work together to hunt food and find shelter. If these groups become too dense, some individuals will fly away to find a less crowded wetland, or they'll engage in cannibalism. Now, interestingly, water striders also display something called wing polymorphism, meaning that even in the same species, they can have offspring that have long wings, medium wings, short wings, and even no wings. This ability to have offspring with different size wings helps water striders adapt to changes in their environment. Long, medium, short, and non-existent wing forms are all necessary depending on the environment and the season, and each one of them has pros and cons. Longer wings let them fly farther and find alternative water bodies if the current one gets too crowded or, turns to cannibalism. But longer wings have a higher risk of getting wet and weighing the water strider down. Shorter wings are less likely to get wet, but it limits how far an individual can disperse. And of course, having no wings prevents a water strider from getting weighed down at all, but it also means it's unable to disperse at all, leaving it stuck in that one body of water. So wingless individuals require a more stable habitat. In other words, permanent wetlands like large rivers or lakes. No wings are no good for seasonal wetlands. Habitats with rougher waters are more likely to have water striders with shorter wings, while habitats with calm waters or seasonal wetlands are more likely to contain long-winged water striders. Okay, now let's look at another aquatic bug, the predacious diving beetle. Diving beetles are the most diverse beetles in the aquatic environment, and like water striders, they can be found in almost every kind of freshwater habitat, from small rock pools to big lakes. The diving in their common name is because, they dive, cycling between underwater and coming to the surface to replenish oxygen. Worldwide, there are about 4,000 species of diving beetle, and while most adults are less than an inch or 2.5 centimeters long, some of the larger species can be nearly twice that size. Now, a diving beetle's shape is optimized for reducing drag and improving stability while swimming underwater. As they swim, diving beetles further streamline their bodies by tucking their 4 frontmost legs into well-fitting grooves. Their 2 hind legs are larger and wider than the other 2 pairs, and they use them like oars or paddles to move them through the water. They can swim both forwards and backwards effectively without needing to pivot. To decrease buoyancy, diving beetles ingest water. To increase buoyancy, they expel water through their rectum. Now, diving beetles don't hold their breath. Instead, most species store air in a space between their elytra and their abdomen, like a scuba tank, but they can also absorb oxygen from the water. Now, their scuba tank alone will let them dive for up to 30 minutes, but when combined with the ability to get oxygen from the water itself, the beetle can conceivably stay submerged for 24 to 36 hours. Some species, though, can go even longer without surfacing, thanks to specialized hair that act essentially as gills, allowing them to remain underwater for weeks at a time. The biggest limiting factor for the presence of diving beetles in a body of water is, kind of unsurprisingly, the presence of fish, which, of course, will happily eat the beetles and their larvae, but also compete for food and just overall change the structure of the habitat. Now, that doesn't mean that diving beetles aren't living where there are fish. They certainly are. So they have some defense mechanisms to help them avoid both parasites and getting eaten by larger predators. Medium and large diving beetle species can secrete two types of substances from glands near their hind end. One is a fluid and the other a paste-like substance. They often go above water to groom themselves with these secretions, especially the paste, distributing them evenly over their body. Now, one thing these secretions do is act as an antimicrobial, protecting the beetle against bacteria and other pathogens. But it's more than just good hygiene. Diving beetles are known to be the only family in the whole animal kingdom that produces certain kinds of steroids. These steroids can cause a predator, like a fish, to regurgitate the beetle if it tries to eat it. When disturbed, diving beetles can also release what I saw described as, quote, odorous food residues, unquote, which sounds like code for poo if you ask me, but that deter a would-be predator. But still, the presence or absence of fish impacts habitat use and habitat selection, which again makes seasonal wetlands important, since these tend to lack fish. Why risk getting eaten if you don't have to, am I right? When diving beetles do need to colonize a new habitat for mating or just better conditions, they fly, they're beetles after all, and find a new habitat by looking for light reflecting off the water's surface. Just one problem with that. In urban areas, diving beetles' attraction to this reflected light can lead them erroneously to artificial lights or wet streets, the glossy surface of cars, or various other things that are not, in fact, water. Now, another obstacle that they face in leaving a body of water is just being able to escape the surface tension of the water itself. So in an ability specific to the smaller species of diving beetles, if they need to break through the water's surface tension, they can rapidly blast ingested water out of their rectum, launching themselves out of the water like a rocket from a submarine before they spread their wings to take flight. Now, the downside to seasonal wetlands is that they're by definition, well, seasonal. They dry up at some point. When this happens, the beetles might fly away to find another wetland, or they might not. Some diving beetles respond to this challenge by going into a state of terrestrial diapause, finding a sheltered spot and pausing their development and waiting for things to get wet again. Others might burrow into the substrate, often as deep as 3 feet, 90 centimeters. This burrowing is actually the reason diving beetles have a high survival rate following droughts. In addition, during summertime dry spells, diving beetles can enter a state of estivation. Estivation is essentially the summertime version of hibernation, a state of torpor that reduces the beetle's energy needs by 70% or more and helps them survive hot, dry conditions. Now, they're not called predacious diving beetles because they're vegetarians. Like water striders, they're predatory insects. Their diet includes both invertebrates and vertebrates. The larvae especially are known to take on prey the same size or even bigger than they are, like fish and tadpoles. Adult diving beetles readily eat both living animals and carrion, so they clean the water in the process. In addition, like water striders, diving beetles may engage in cannibalism. And since they feed on mosquito larvae, they play a role in the biological control of those summertime favorites. Now, on a side note, I recently read a headline, although admittedly I didn't read the article, that said, quote, "We may now have the ability to eliminate all the world's mosquitoes, but should we?" unquote. My answer would be absolutely not. Mosquitoes and their larvae are food for other creatures. As much as we might dislike them, I think eliminating them completely could have some disastrous unforeseen consequences. But I digress. Diving beetles locate prey using a strong sense of both taste and smell. Diving beetles can detect sweet, sour, salty, and bitter chemicals in the water. Their smell receptors are on their antennae. And diving beetles are attracted to alarm pheromones emitted by the fish that they prey on. So these pheromones actually work against the fish, luring the diving beetles to them. In males, the sense of smell is also used to locate mates. Female diving beetles secrete pheromones that attract nearby males. Now, naturally, the biggest threat to diving beetles is the degradation and disappearance of their habitats, due largely to human activities like development. Urbanization has led to a decrease in both quantity and quality of aquatic habitats, increasing the distance between suitable habitats and exposing diving beetles to a higher risk of predation during dispersal. Okay, one final fun fact. Despite their arsenal of chemical defenses, diving beetle remains have been found in prehistoric fossilized human poop in Nevada. And they're also eaten in Mexico, Japan, China, Thailand, and New Guinea, just to name a few. And in parts of Africa, because of the steroids that the beetles produce, it's believed that inducing the beetles to bite can stimulate breast growth in girls. They're also induced to bite the tongue to help teach boys to whistle. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but it seems like a good place to end this episode. If you want to support the podcast, well, that would be fantastic. Here's some ways you can do that. Tell a friend, listen together or just get together later and discuss your favorite diving beetle defense mechanism or whatever. Better yet, you and your friend can become patrons. Subscriptions start at just $5 a month, and with 3 paid months, you get some sweet Dispatches from the Forest merch. Go to patreon.com/dispatchesfromtheforest to find out all the details. You can make a single donation through PayPal using my email address, dispatchesfromtheforest@gmail.com, which is also, of course, where you can email me if you happen to have a question or a comment or a request for a future episode. You can donate using the Cash App and the hashtag ForestNerd. Then there's the merch store. Find the merch store at cafepress.com/shop/dispatchesfromtheforest. Click on products, find something you like. Finally, you can follow Dispatches from the Forest on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara, reminding you to go outside and get dirty. The Dispatches from the Forest podcast is a production of Dispatches from the Forest. It may not be used or rebroadcast whole or in part without express written permission.